My grandmother never owned a cookbook, never watched a cooking program, and never once followed a recipe. And yet, every single thing she made tasted better than anything I've bought from a supermarket in the last 15 years. Her roast potatoes had a shatter to them that I still haven't managed to replicate. Her stews were so deep in flavor you'd swear she'd been cooking them for days. She hadn't. She just knew things. Shortcuts. Tiny invisible adjustments that took seconds but changed everything. And here's what troubles me. When she died, most of those shortcuts died with her. Because nobody wrote them down. Nobody thought they were worth recording. They were just how you cook. This is 25 of those lost techniques. I've spent months collecting them. From retired home economists, from handwritten notebooks found in charity shops in Leeds and Swansea, from women in their 80s who still cook this way every day. Some of these will seem obvious. Others will genuinely change the way your food tastes tonight. There was a moment, somewhere between 1985 and 1995, when an entire generation of home cooks quietly stopped passing down the techniques that had kept British families fed for centuries. It didn't happen dramatically. There was no announcement. But if you trace it back, the pattern is unmistakable. In 1980, home economics was a compulsory subject in most British secondary schools. By 1992, it had been folded into design and technology, diluted, to the point where students were more likely to design a food label than actually cook a meal. A 2024 survey by the Food Foundation found that 42% of adults under 35 in the UK cannot cook a meal from scratch without a recipe app. Not choose not to, cannot. The skills simply weren't transferred. At the same time, the ready meal market exploded. According to research published by Kantar, in early 2025, the average British household now spends $1,247 a year on pre-prepared food, up 38% from 2015. The industry didn't just offer convenience, it offered permission. Permission to stop learning. Permission to stop tasting as you go. Permission to stop trusting your hands and your instincts. But here's what the food industry can't replicate: the micro techniques, the grandmother shortcuts, the things that take 3 seconds, cost nothing, and transform a dish from adequate to extraordinary. They couldn't automate them, so they made us forget them instead. Let's bring them back. The first thing your grandmother knew, and the ready meal industry prays you've forgotten, is that cold butter and hot pans are not interchangeable. When you're making mashed potatoes, the butter goes cold, not melted, not softened. Cold, straight from the fridge, cut into small cubes, folded into the hot potato. A retired home economics teacher in Harrogate explained it to me like this. Cold fat melting slowly into hot starch creates pockets of richness that distribute evenly. Melted butter just slides off the surface. It's the same amount of butter, the same potatoes, but the result is a completely different texture. Try it once, you'll never go back. The second shortcut is even simpler, and I learned it from a handwritten notebook I found in a charity shop in Llanelli. Before you roast any vegetable, carrots, parsnips, beetroot, anything, toss them in a tiny amount of sugar. Not enough to taste sweet, a 1/4 teaspoon for a full tray. What it does is accelerate the Maillard reaction. That's the caramelization process that creates the deep, savory, almost meaty flavor on roasted food. Food scientists at the University of Leeds confirmed in a 2023 study that even trace amounts of added sucrose can reduce caramelization time by up to 30%. Your Nan didn't know the chemistry, she just knew her parsnips came out better. Third, this one is about oil, and it's so simple it almost feels like cheating. When you're frying onions, the base of nearly every British savory dish, add a pinch of salt at the very beginning, not at the end. At the start. The salt draws moisture out of the onion cells through osmosis, which means they soften faster, caramelize more evenly, and develop a sweetness that you cannot achieve by cooking them longer without salt. A woman in her late 70s in Doncaster told me her mother called this waking the onions up. She's been doing it since 1963. 4. Render your bacon fat and keep it. This sounds old-fashioned because it is. Before the 1980s, virtually every British kitchen had a jar of bacon dripping next to the cooker. According to the National Archives' digitized collection of wartime recipe pamphlets, bacon fat was listed as a primary cooking fat in over 60% of Ministry of Food recipes between 1940 and 1954. It adds a savory depth to fried eggs, to roast potatoes, to anything you'd normally cook in vegetable oil. 1 tablespoon replaces a stock cube's worth of flavor. It costs nothing. You've already bought the bacon. You're just throwing away the best part. 5. If you're making a pie, any pie, sweet or savory, brush the raw pastry with a beaten egg yolk mixed with a teaspoon of cold water before it goes in the oven. Not egg wash from a whole egg, just the yolk. The difference in color and crispness is remarkable. A bakery owner in Bath, who's been making pie since 1978, told me the secret is the fat content in the yolk. It's roughly 26% fat compared to the white's trace amount. That fat crisps. It deepens the color to a rich golden brown that whole egg wash simply can't match. Every competition baker knows this. Somewhere along the way, the rest of us forgot. There's a reason your Nan's gravy tasted like something from another world, and it had nothing to do with a packet mix. Shortcut 6. She added a splash of vinegar, malt vinegar specifically, maybe a teaspoon, stirred into the gravy right at the end, just before serving. The acidity doesn't make the gravy taste sour. It does something far more interesting. It brightens every other flavor already in the pan. The meatiness becomes meatier, the onion becomes sweeter, the depth doubles. Food scientists call this flavor potentiation, and it's the same reason a squeeze of lemon transforms a risotto. But in British cooking, it was always vinegar, malt vinegar, sitting there on the table next to the salt and pepper, doing triple duty as a condiment, a cleaning product, and a secret weapon. 7. Salt your pasta water until it tastes like the sea. Not a pinch, not a teaspoon, a proper fistful. This isn't Italian advice dressed up as British. This was standard practice in post-war British kitchens, where pasta was boiled alongside potatoes and dumplings in heavily salted water. The starch absorbs the seasoning as it cooks, which means you need less salt in your sauce. A nutritional analysis published in the British Food Journal in 2024 showed that pasta cooked in properly salted water actually requires 40% less added sodium in the final dish compared to undersalted cooking water with salt added later. Less sodium, more flavor. 8. A pinch of mustard powder in cheese sauce. Not enough to taste mustardy, just enough. A 1/4 teaspoon for a standard batch, to amplify the cheese flavor without adding more cheese. This was common knowledge in the 1960s and 1970s. Delia Smith mentioned it in 1971. It works because mustard contains compounds called isothiocyanates that stimulate the same taste receptors as umami. You're not adding mustard flavor, you're boosting cheese flavor. It's biochemistry disguised as common sense. 9. Brown sugar in your bolognese, or your chili, or any tomato-based sauce. 1/2 teaspoon. It counteracts the acidity of tinned tomatoes without making the dish sweet. A retired canteen cook in Wigan. She cooked school dinners for 31 years. Told me this was non-negotiable in every institutional kitchen she worked in. Tinned tomatoes are sharp, she said. Sugar rounds them off. Everyone knew that. Everyone did. Then we started buying jars of pre-made sauce that had already added the sugar for us, along with 14 other ingredients we never asked for. And 10. Toast your spices before you use them. Cumin, coriander, turmeric, paprika. 30 seconds in a dry pan over medium heat until you can smell them. That's it. The heat releases volatile aromatic compounds that are locked inside the raw spice. A 2023 paper from researchers at the University of Nottingham's School of Biosciences measured a 47% increase in detectable flavor compounds in toasted cumin versus raw. 47%. From 30 seconds of work. Your great-grandmother didn't measure volatile compounds. She just held the pan over the stove, gave it a shake, and knew when it smelled right. Every British kitchen used to have an unwritten rule about resting meat, and then microwaves arrived and we collectively forgot it. 11. After you roast a chicken, leave it alone for at least 20 minutes before you carve. Not 5, not 10. 20. During cooking, the muscle fibers contract and push moisture toward the center of the bird. Resting allows those fibers to relax and reabsorb the liquid. Cut too early, and that moisture runs out onto the board. A meat science review in the Journal of Food Science confirmed that rested poultry retains up to 12% more moisture than meat carved immediately. 12% is the difference between juicy and dry, between memorable and forgettable. 12. Boil your roast potatoes for exactly 7 minutes before roasting. Not 5, not 10, 7. Then drain them, put the lid on the pot, and shake them vigorously until the edges are roughed up and fluffy. Those rough edges are where the fat grabs hold. Those edges are where the crunch lives. A grandmother in Middlesbrough, 83 years old, showed me this in her kitchen last autumn. Her potatoes were flawless. She's been doing it the same way since 1967. You want them angry, she said, bashed about. 13. When baking a Victoria sponge, take your eggs out of the fridge 2 hours before you start. Room temperature eggs incorporate more air when whisked, and air is the entire structural basis of a sponge cake. Cold eggs produce a denser, flatter result. The Women's Institute has been teaching this since the 1940s, and a 2024 baking science paper from Harper Adams University confirmed that room temperature eggs produce up to 20% more volume in whisked batters. 14. When making custard, proper custard, not powder, temper the eggs. That means pouring a small amount of the hot milk into the beaten egg yolks first, whisking constantly, before adding the egg mixture back into the pan. This raises the egg temperature gradually and prevents curdling. It takes 15 seconds. It's the difference between silk and scrambled eggs. Every custard recipe before 1980 assumed you knew this. Modern recipes often skip it. The result is a generation of people who think custard is supposed to come from a tin. 15. Soak your chips in cold water for at least 30 minutes before frying. This removes surface starch, which is what causes limpness and pale color. After soaking, dry them thoroughly. A damp chip in hot oil is a dangerous chip. Then fry twice. Once at a lower temperature to cook through, once at a higher temperature to crisp. Every chip shop in Britain used to do this as standard. According to a 2023 audit by the National Federation of Fish Fryers, fewer than half of independent chippies now double fry. The ones that still do are the ones with queues out the door, 16. When you're making a stew, sear the meat in small batches, not all at once. If you crowd the pan, the temperature drops. The meat releases water instead of browning, and you get gray, steamed beef instead of rich, caramelized pieces. A food science lecturer at Sheffield Hallam University explained that the Maillard reaction, the chemical process that creates that deep brown crust, requires pan temperatures above 140 degree weighings. Every additional piece of cold meat drops the temperature by approximately 10 to 15 degrees. Smaller batches, higher heat, better stew. Your grandmother knew this instinctively. 17. Warm your plates. Run them under hot water or put them in a low oven for 5 minutes before serving. Hot food on a cold plate loses heat rapidly. A thermal imaging study cited in the Caterer magazine in 2024 showed that food served on a room temperature plate drops by nearly 8 degrees in the first 3 minutes. On a warmed plate, it retains serving temperature for over 12 minutes. This was standard in every British household until the 1990s. It costs nothing. It takes no effort. And it makes everything taste better because flavor perception is directly linked to temperature. In 1952, throwing away food wasn't just wasteful, it was practically a moral failing. And that pressure produced some of the most flavorful techniques in British cooking. 18. Stale bread makes better breadcrumbs. Better bread. Pudding and better stuffing than fresh bread ever could. The moisture loss concentrates the flavor and creates a firmer texture that absorbs butter, stock, and egg without turning to mush. Wrap. the charity that tracks UK food waste, estimated in their 2025 annual report that British households throw away approximately 20 million slices of bread every single day. 20 million. Your grandmother would have turned every one of those into something worth eating. 19. Keep a stock bag in your freezer. Every time you peel a carrot, trim a celery stalk, or cut the ends off an onion, the offcuts go in the bag. When the bag is full, empty it into a pot of water. Add a bay leaf and a few peppercorns, simmer for an hour, and strain. That's fresh vegetable stock. No salt, no preservatives, no palm oil. Which, incidentally, appears in over 60% of commercial stock cubes sold in UK supermarkets according to a 2024 ingredient analysis by the Soil Association. Free stock from scraps you were going to bin. This was universal practice in British kitchens until the stock cube made it seem unnecessary. 20. Leftover mashed potato makes the best fish cakes, potato cakes, and pie toppings you'll ever eat. Cold mashed potato has a firmer, more moldable texture than fresh. It fries better. It holds its shape. A fishmonger in Grimsby. 4th generation. His family's been selling fish since 1928. Told me that the best fish cakes are always made with yesterday's mash. Fresh mash is too wet, he said. It falls apart in the pan. Yesterday's mash holds the fish together. It's not leftovers. 21. Overripe bananas, bruised apples, soft berries. None of these are rubbish. They're sweeter, more flavorful, and better for baking than their perfect-looking counterparts. A 2023 study from the University of Reading's Department of Food and Nutritional Sciences measured a 22% increase in fructose concentration in bananas with brown-spotted skin compared to uniformly yellow ones. That's free sweetness. Your grandmother's banana bread wasn't better because of her recipe. It was better because she used the bananas everyone else threw away. I need to stop here for a moment, because while I was putting this list together, I realized something that genuinely unsettled me. Every single shortcut on this list is free. Not one of them requires a special gadget, a premium ingredient, or a subscription to anything. They cost nothing. They use things you already have, and they produce results that are measurably, provably superior to the convenience alternatives. So why did we stop? It wasn't ignorance, it wasn't laziness, it was deliberate. The processed food industry doesn't profit from a population that knows how to make brilliant gravy from pan drippings and a splash of vinegar. They profit from a population that reaches for a jar. Every forgotten shortcut on this list represents a purchase the food industry would rather you make. And the most effective way to sell you the solution is to make sure you've forgotten the original skill. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's a business model. And the proof is on your supermarket shelves. Thousands of products designed to replace techniques that take less time than opening the packet. Right, let's finish this list. There are 5 ingredients that used to sit in every kitchen cupboard in Britain, and 4 of them have almost completely vanished from modern shopping lists. 22. White pepper. Not black pepper. White. It was the default seasoning in British cooking for most of the 20th century. It's milder, less sharp, and it doesn't leave visible specks in light-colored sauces, mash, or soups. More importantly, it has a slightly fermented, earthy warmth that black pepper doesn't. A spice buyer who's worked with UK supermarkets for over 20 years told me that white pepper sales have dropped by over 70% since 1990. People forgot it exists, she said. They think pepper is pepper. 23. Anchovy paste, 1 centimeter squeezed from the tube into a lamb stew, a bolognese, or a shepherd's pie. You won't taste fish. What you'll taste is depth, a savory richness that salt alone can't produce. The reason is glutamate. Anchovies are one of the most concentrated natural sources of this umami compound, and a 2024 flavor chemistry paper published in the journal Food Research International confirmed that even sub-threshold quantities of anchovy-derived glutamate significantly enhanced perceived meatiness in blind tastings. Gentleman's relish has been on British tables since 1828. Anchovy paste is the quiet ancestor of every umami hack that food influencers now treat as a revelation. 24. A bay leaf in everything. Rice, soup, stew, custard, milk for bechamel, even a pot of boiling. Potatoes. Bay leaves release linalool and eugenol during simmering aromatic compounds that add a subtle herbal undertone to anything liquid-based. They cost pence. They last for months dried. And yet, a 2025 Tesco Club Card data analysis showed that bay leaves are now purchased by fewer than 8% of regular shoppers. 8%. In the 1970s, they were as standard as salt. One leaf, simmered quietly, doing enormous work that nobody notices until it's missing. And 25. The last shortcut, the simplest one, and arguably the most important. Taste as you go. Not at the end, not once. Constantly. Every time you add an ingredient, taste. Every time you adjust the heat, taste. Before you serve, taste. This was not a technique. It was a reflex. Every competent home cook in Britain had it. A wooden spoon in one hand, a tasting spoon in the other. You didn't follow the recipe because the recipe couldn't account for your specific ingredients, your hob, your pan, your water. You followed your mouth. And somewhere between the rise of ready meals and the obsession with following online recipes to the gram, we replaced that instinct with obedience. The food got worse, and we stopped trusting ourselves. The beautiful thing about every single shortcut on this list is that none of them require expensive equipment, specialist ingredients, or culinary training. They require attention. That's all. Attention to what's happening in the pan. Attention to temperature, to timing, to the smell of cumin seeds hitting a hot surface. These are not professional techniques. They are domestic ones, developed by ordinary people cooking 3 meals a day on tight budgets in small kitchens with limited ingredients. They are, in every meaningful sense, the original life hacks. And they work better than anything you can buy. If you want to start somewhere, start with 3. Pick the potato shake. Pick the cold butter in the mash. Pick tasting as you go. Do those 3 things this week and pay attention to the difference. You don't need to overhaul your entire kitchen. You just need to remember what was already known. 1 generation ago, this knowledge was ordinary. It lived in every kitchen, passed down without ceremony, without a single recipe card. Grandmothers taught it to daughters, who taught it to sons, who taught it to neighbors. Nobody called them hacks. Nobody filmed them for social media. They were just how you cooked. And then, gradually, they disappeared. Not because they stopped working. Because we were sold the idea that cooking should be faster, easier, more convenient. And that convenience was worth the trade-off in flavor, nutrition, and skill. It wasn't. It never was. But the good news is that knowledge doesn't expire. Every technique on this list works exactly as well in 2026 as it did in 1955. The chemistry hasn't changed. The physics of a hot pan and a cold piece of butter haven't changed. The only thing that changed was us, and we can change back. This week, cook 1 meal using at least 3 of these shortcuts. Just 1. Time it. Taste it. And then tell me in the comments what you noticed. I want to hear from you, especially if you've got your own family shortcuts that I missed. There are hundreds more of these, passed down in kitchens across Britain, and I want to collect as many as possible for future videos. If this meant something to you, if it reminded you of someone who cooked this way, or if it helped you understand why their food tasted the way it did, pass it along. Send it to someone who cooks for their family. Share it in your community group. These techniques survived wars, rationing, and poverty. They shouldn't be defeated by a microwave meal and a 2-minute attention span. I've already started researching the next batch. Regional British techniques, things specific to Cornwall, to Yorkshire, to the Scottish Highlands. If you want to see them, subscribe. And if there's a shortcut your grandmother swore by that I haven't covered, drop it below. I read every single comment. Let's rebuild this library together.